Hello, everybody. I am here with a subscriber of mine. I would say an OG subscriber who's been following the channel for a long time. They go by the name of Glitch Life. And they are going to be shedding some light, hopefully, on why Cathie Wood has been buying the crap out of this stock called Ginkgo Bioworks, ticker symbol DNA. I first started seeing Cathie buy the stock probably back in November, October of 2021, when the stock was around $10, $15. Stock has collapsed since then to $3. And over the past 2 weeks, Cathie's purchased close to 3 million shares of this. So there's obviously some type of value here for the Palantir people that are watching this. Sham Sankar, COO of Palantir, is on the board of Ginkgo Bioworks, so a little bit of a connection that also got me interested in well. And Glitch Life, what is your position in DNA? Is it one of your second biggest highest?
So Ginkgo Bioworks DNA is my second largest holding, followed only by Palantir.
Okay, so you definitely are into the stock as well. So let's get started with it. I guess the first question is, what is sort of Ginkgo Bioworks and kind of what is your investment thesis around it?
So the way I view Ginkgo Bioworks is it is a pick and shovel play on what I would call the fourth industrial revolution. It's one of those companies like Palantir where it's a winner take most market. There's basically three parts to the business that currently exist at the moment. You have their Foundry program, which basically works as an AWS type program. What it does is it allows biotech companies from around the world to utilize a program instead of putting in their own investments into all of the research that they need to do. They can log into Ginkgo's platform and they can use Ginkgo's platform remotely in order to do their own cell research. The second part of their business is their biosecurity business. Now, they essentially do mass testing at airports around the world, primarily in the United States at the moment. They've done some expansion into Europe. It looks like they're going to be expanding into China as well. And they do COVID-19 monitoring. They've also introduced a second part to that where they're doing wastewater testing. So they can go to a city and they can test the wastewater in order to check out what virus particulate happens to be in that water in order to tell essentially what the spread of different viruses happens to be looking like. And then the third part is their cell library, which is the really interesting thing. It's part of their Foundry program, which is their own version of AWS. And any person that signs up to utilize their program have access to their entire cell library. And as more and more businesses actually access the platform and do the research, it increases that cell library, which basically drives down costs and allows for accelerated research.
Okay, so there's three sort of core components to it. There's the platform approach that other biotech companies can access. Then there's the biosecurity stuff. Then there's the cell library stuff. So first question before I get into the platform stuff, when you keep saying Foundry, do you mean they're building on top of Palantir's Foundry or using that as like a metaphor?
No, it's a metaphor. So one of their programs is basically called Foundry for Biotech.
Okay.
There's two parts to it. And the first part is basically like an AWS type service, and it allows anyone to use their facilities remotely to do their own research.
Okay, so this is sort of segues into the platform thing. When you mean AWS for research, the way I understand biotech companies is kind of like they're hit or miss in terms of the drug either works or the drug doesn't work. Ginkgo, and the reason I haven't invested in it, primarily it's naively, I get kind of scared when I see them described as a biotech company because I'm like, oh, what if the drugs just don't work? Because I've dealt with that in the past. But you're saying it's not necessarily about the drugs working or not working. It's about the AWS, the platform they offer for other biotech companies to use the platform in order to see if their drugs work.
Yeah, so it helps to think of Ginkgo Bioworks as a pick and shovel play on the entire biotechnology industry. They're not developing any type of drug. So they don't have a pipeline. They're not trying to do clinical trials. They're not doing anything along those lines. Well, instead, what they're doing is they've created a series of laboratories that exist around the United States. And what companies have the ability to do instead of invest in their own laboratories, which is incredibly expensive, and invest in their own R&D, which is also incredibly expensive, they can do it for a fraction of a cost using Ginkgo's platform. So they actually log into Ginkgo's platform and they're able to do all of that research remotely without the intensive capital which most biotech companies have to go through.
How do you do that? Does Ginkgo just have a lot of infrastructure and they like send the Ginkgo laboratories what they want researched on? Like, how does Ginkgo get away with this, but they can't?
Yes, they have their own infrastructures. They've invested primarily in a massive amount of infrastructure. They're primarily located around the Boston area, and they've been upgrading that infrastructure around the U.S. They've been opening up a bunch of different offices, including Australia. They just did another one in Southern California. I don't remember the place exactly, but yes.
Okay, so basically, if I'm a biotech company and I want to like test certain molecules and variables, I can tap into Ginkgo's laboratories, tell their people to kind of do the testing for me remotely, and then they would send back the results, and they make money. The laboratories make money in terms of like a fee for basically doing that.
Somewhat. They have a multi-use model for collecting fees. There's some companies that they pay upfront. They have a royalty-based model as well. So once something is developed and it goes to market, they get a royalty off of whatever goes to market. And then,
Really
yep. And then
interesting.
the third, which is the most interesting, is they take equity in biotech startups. So there's a lot of biotech companies that they don't have the money in order to be able to fund that research, but they still have some good science behind what they're doing. And they're utilizing Ginkgo's platform in order to get equity. One of the most interesting companies that's doing that right now is they have a partnership with Selective Bioscience. And what Selective Bioscience does is it's one of those gene editing companies. What they're trying to do is what you would call redosing.
Mm.
So if somebody gets a single treatment, the body has an immune response to that treatment. Selective Bioscience is getting rid of that autoimmune response so you can dose multiple times. And what Ginkgo does is they get equity and then they get downstream revenue based off of royalties for any product that they help develop.
So if we figure out, one of the world's greatest drugs through Ginkgo, and that goes to market just because they use Ginkgo's platform in the early days when they weren't the world's greatest drug, Ginkgo would get a royalty in perpetuity on that drug.
Yep, they get a royalty in perpetuity on that drug. So it's really a pick and shovel play off of entire biotech, and they've been expanding to other markets as well, which is really interesting. They just bought a major agricultural biotech company from Bayer, and one of the things that they're doing is they're working on a molecule in order to produce nitrogen, which is used in fertilizer across the United States, which is a massive shortage of right now because we get the majority of our nitrogen from Russia.
Right,
So
right.
they would be able to produce that synthetically here in the US, where before we wouldn't be able to do that.
Right. No, this is very interesting. So the platform approach, I mean, obviously businesses and SaaS offerings, when you think of the platform, the value to the platform is everything, right? Like I'm an individual content creator, but the value really is on YouTube because YouTube is the platform that has all this content. So platform businesses are very interesting. I didn't know Ginkgo takes a percentage of royalties on drugs, which it makes sense. Now, the downside is a lot of drugs fail at the end of the day. So maybe Ginkgo incurs a lot of cost allowing these drugs to be tested and they end up failing. But the ones that work, I mean, those could be actually very big for them. Okay, cool. So that was the platform stuff. Now, before I get to biosecurity and cell library, I want to kind of piggyback off of the fourth genomics revolution. Can you explain what that means? Or you said fourth industrial revolution, something like that?
So when I look at investing, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to look at trends that are happening, 10 to 20 years in the future. And like one of the arguments that Cathie Wood has been making recently is that there's a lot of innovation that's happening and innovation solves problems. So I'm trying to get an idea of what things are going to look like 10, 15, 20 years out. And I'm trying to get at the forefront of those ideas. A lot of people like to go back to Warren Buffett, and people wonder, what his investing strategy is. And most people, they don't really tend to get it. Like his biggest thing is he's looking at stuff that everyone is going to need, and then he buys, and then like his talent is to do nothing. And that's something that most people don't have the ability to do. So what I want to do is see what the world is going to look like, see what things people are going to need, and then I'm looking for pick and shovel plays that are basically going to be a part of the world long term.
So why
Ginkgo
do you think
Bioworks,
DNA is one of those things people need in 20 years or be a company people use in 20 years?
because we're having a what we would call the genomics revolution. That's one of the big parts. Like the programming and editing of cells, biotech revolution, agricultural.
DNA sequencing, right?
Yep. Yep. Like one of the things that they recently just did as part of their fermentation program is they're working with a company in Canada, and they've basically developed a molecule that has the ability to produce THC. So instead of actually having to grow marijuana, they can just program the cells in order to produce THC as a byproduct and then sell those and their cannabinoid products. And
Wow.
this is something that just recently occurred.
Wow. Yeah, no, it's very interesting. Very interesting. Okay. So in the context of that, I think that starts to make sense for like how, at least as a platform, they could work. Biosecurity. So how do you see this in terms of like a layer to the business? You mentioned COVID and vaccines and stuff like that. Do you think there are threats to future pandemics and DNA could use proprietary technology to potentially mitigate those things from happening?
So yes, but it's still very early stage. Biosecurity is not something that has existed in the United States until the COVID-19 pandemic. And Ginkgo Bioworks has been at the forefront of that. Uh, the Biden administration just created a council in order to develop a biosecurity platform as part of the defense industry for the entire United States. And Ginkgo is one of the only private companies that was actually given a seat at that table. So they have been working on building that for the US. What that's going to look like in the future, we don't know. What I can state is what happens now is they have testing kits and testing stations at every international airport in the United States, as well as most of the schools on the East Coast, and they're doing that testing currently. I know they started dabbling into monkeypox, they started dabbling into the wastewater treatments. Um, so it's really interesting what's happening.
Would the revenue there be coming from governments, you think, versus
Uh, that
companies?
that's their primary revenue driver at the moment. It is coming mostly from the government as we speak,
Got it. Okay.
and that's state and federal government.
Okay. And then the cell library, what is sort of the thesis here for Ginkgo Bioworks?
So the cell library is economics of scale. Basically, the more people use their platform, the more that library grows, and the
So
more
network
value.
effects.
Yep, network effect. So the more value that that library gathers. Uh, Essentially, other companies that choose to engage in Foundry, they have the ability to piggyback off of Ginkgo's cell library. And as it increases, it reduces the cost to actually use the program and increases downstream revenue.
So like if I'm a cancer drug company and I use Ginkgo Bioworks and they have certain cells that you've got certain data on, and you have and I was doing, I don't know, leg cancer, and then a heart cancer, but I don't even know if you get cancer in the heart. You probably could. Drug company comes to come up and is like trying to figure out how to sort of match similarities between the other company that's doing cancer in a different part of the body, and those cells kind of can't compound off of each other and sort of give them more breadth of information, which also reduce costs at the end of the day to actually analyze that data. Is there a like a privacy concern there or something, like using other companies' data? Do you think the network effect in general is just good, or how do you kind of deal with that if it were to
So
happen?
it's something interesting that Jason Kelly, had the CEO of Ginkgo, brought up in their last earnings call. And they stated that was something that they were learning to navigate because a lot of the companies that exist, they want exclusivity,
Exactly.
and
That's
and they're not allowing exclusivity. So what they're doing is they're reducing the cost of the research exponentially, so that they're able to get around that. So people are willing to take a little bit of a hit on not having everything in house in order to get to market quickly
right.
and as cheaply as possible.
Yeah, money talks. It's like, all right, you could either have your proprietary data or you could pay 1/10 of what you were paying before. And if you don't have that data in the first place, or if you don't have the money to pay for, you won't even get that data anyway. So it's kind of a pay to play thing here. Um,
Exactly.
Now, why is Cathie Wood buying the stock? What is, I mean, I know you walked through the thesis, but is there a certain obsession she has that the rest of the market is not seeing? Because it seems like she's one of the only real institutions holding on to the stock.
So that goes into the pick and shovel play. We don't know what biotech is going to look like in the next 10, 15, 20 years, but Ginkgo is the only company that is working with all of them. So it's basically a rising tide lifts all ships. Ginkgo would be that rising tide. So it doesn't matter what company is going to come out on top, Ginkgo is going to get a piece of that. That's the same reason I invest in Palantirs. It doesn't matter what company is going to, excel, like with a new Tesla partnership. We have no idea who's going to be the winners, but we do know that Palantir is going to be the rising tide that will rise with all of the companies.
Ginkgo falling from 15 to 3, did that scare you, or is that just macro? Did that have anything to do with the fundamentals of the company? Or
A combination. There are a few bear case scenarios with Ginkgo Bioworks that people are worried about. One of them is CEO compensation, because people consider it to be out of control, but most people haven't actually taken the time to do the research. Like most of the shares that CEOs have been rewarded with is in a lockup. So they have to meet certain milestones before those things get unlocked. And then because the company SPACed, they basically had to claim 10 years in arrears of compensation all at once. So it looks like it's astronomically more than it actually is. The other thing is they do offer generate stock-based compensation to employees in order to get some of the best engineers out there. So it's one of the same problems with Palantir. So you're seeing dilution on a regular basis. But what people also don't tend to realize is as soon as those royalties start coming in, like the revenue is going to look really lumpy going forward. That's one of the reasons they don't give quarterly guidance. They only give yearly guidance. It's because like in one quarter revenue can be incredibly high and then the others it can be incredibly low, but that just depends on how those contracts are working and as projects get entered and projects get finished.
Right. All right. Last question for you. Obviously, this is not financial advice. No one should, everyone should do their own due diligence. But like, I don't know. What is the potential you see for the company? It's your second biggest position. How do you see it kind of playing out? And do you think it's going to take 5, 10 years for that to happen?
Um, that's a difficult question to answer. I honestly, I'm expecting a 20x return.
Okay, so you're kind of all in. You think this is a big one?
Yeah, this is a big
20x
one.
from here, or 20x from 15, or 20x from $3?
20x from SPAC price.
So that was about $10. Okay, wow.
Yeah.
So
So,
you're
I think long term, this is one of those companies that you buy and you hold forever. I mean, this is, and to be clear, this is not something where you're going to see a return instantaneously.
yes,
Like 2025 can come around and you're not going to see that much movement. But as those contracts start to get fulfilled and the products that they help create start to go to market, what that does is it creates a super reliable stream of revenue because it's basically all downstream residual royalties that they'll be making. And that's going to create a cash flow monster over time. And then as they continue, like they have $1.5 billion currently on their balance book. They have enough money to actually run for years on end without ever having to raise again.
right.
And then they're utilizing it very strategically during M&A, like as most of these companies have dropped like a rock. And as they continue to do that and to consolidate the biotech industry, I think it's going to end up being the leader.
Okay, it's interesting. I'm happy you did this with me because I really wanted to go deeper into another platform-based company because I mean, that's why I love Palantir so much. I see it as that platform, and Ginkgo Bioworks. It scared me when I saw biotech. I'm like, oh, they got drugs, but then I realized, wait, it's not. It can't be about drugs. There's no way Cathie's
It's not a
buying
drug company.
8 million shares for a drug, right? It's like, yeah. Okay, very interesting. Thank you so much, Glitch Life, for joining me. Avid supporter of the channel. Appreciate you a lot. And yeah, hopefully more people have some thoughts about DNA. Leave them in the comments. I'm sure Glitch Life will be there and they can answer any questions that come up. And yeah, thank you all for watching and listening.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
Thank you for being here. See you next time.